I gave 31 years of my life to a woman who spent the last 5 of them looking at me like I was furniture she'd forgotten to throw out. My name is Herschel Pruitt. I'm 63 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Bozeman, Montana, and on most mornings I wake up before sunrise, make a pot of coffee strong enough to strip paint, and sit on my back porch watching the mountains go pink while a dog named Walter. My daughter named him years ago after some cartoon character I never understood, puts his head in my lap and sighs like he knows something. I'm not a complicated man. I never was. I spent 34 years working construction, started swinging a hammer at 22, worked my way up to project supervisor by 40, and by the time I was 50 I was running a mid-size crew out of Missoula, building custom homes for people who had more money than I'd ever see. I drove a used truck. I packed a lunch. I came home with sawdust in my hair, and my wife, her name was Therese, would wrinkle her nose and tell me to shower before dinner. I thought that was just how marriage worked. We had a daughter together. She was born in 1991, on a Tuesday in February, when a blizzard had closed half the roads in the county, and I nearly ran a red light getting Therese to St. Patrick Hospital. My daughter came into this world screaming, fists balled up, furious at everything, which, I'd later learn, was a personality trait she kept. I loved her more than I knew how to say. Still do. That's the part that makes all of this hard to explain. Therese and I met when we were 24. She was working the front desk at a hotel in Billings, and I was on a job nearby. She was beautiful in the way that makes a young man stop thinking clearly, laughed at everything, wore her hair long. We got married 18 months after we met, which looking back was probably too fast, but I was in love, and I didn't know the difference between being in love and being certain. For the first 15 years, things were fine. Not perfect, never perfect, but fine. We argued about money sometimes, which is to say she wanted more of it, and I was doing my honest best. I wasn't a man who went out drinking. I didn't chase other women. I came home. I fixed things around the house. I coached my daughter's soccer team for 3 seasons, even though I knew nothing about soccer. I showed up. But somewhere around the time my daughter started high school, Therese started changing. Or maybe she'd always been this way, and I'd just been too busy with work to notice. She started comparing our life to other people's lives. Neighbors who renovated their kitchen. Her sister who married a dentist. A couple from church who took a cruise every January. She'd bring these things up at dinner, not as conversation, but as verdicts. You could have gone into real estate, she told me once. You know enough about houses. I probably said something like, I like what I do. She probably said nothing after that, just looked at her plate. There was a man named Fletcher Corbin. He came into our lives through the Homeowners Association. Therese had gotten involved in the neighborhood board, which I'd encouraged because I thought it would make her happy, and Fletcher had just moved into the development 2 streets over. He was a financial advisor. He wore collared shirts on weekends. He had one of those laughs that fills a room. I didn't think anything of it at first. I'm not a suspicious man by nature. Therese mentioned him a few times. Said he was interesting to talk to. Said he had ideas about growing wealth. I half listened, the way I half listened to a lot of things in those years, which I'm not proud of. I was tired most evenings. Construction is hard work, and I was 51. And my knees were reminding me of that every morning. By the time I understood what was happening, it had already been happening for a long time. My daughter was 25 and living in Denver by then, working for a marketing firm, and it was she who finally said it out loud. She came home for Thanksgiving, and after Therese went to bed, my daughter and I sat at the kitchen table, and she said very quietly that she thought I should know what people were saying. What people? I asked. People who see Mom and Mr. Corbin at places, she said. Together. I went to bed that night, and I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark listening to Therese breathe beside me, and I did the math on 31 years and what it adds up to when you find out it's been a lie. It doesn't add up. That's the honest answer. It doesn't add up to anything clean. I didn't explode. That's not who I am. I waited. I watched. And within 3 weeks I had enough to know my daughter had been telling me the truth. I filed in February. Therese didn't fight it. I think she was relieved. Her attorney tried to make noise about the house, which I had largely built with my own crew and my own hands on a plot of land my father had left me. I had had the foresight, years earlier when we refinanced, to keep that land in a separate title. My attorney, a woman named Arlene, who I will owe a debt to until I die, made sure the house stayed mine. We were divorced by July. Therese moved into Fletcher's house 2 streets over before the ink was properly dry. I heard this from a neighbor. I didn't go looking for the information. It came to me the way unwanted things do, unsolicited, early, with nowhere to put it. My daughter called me the following spring to tell me that her mother and Fletcher were getting married. There was a pause after she said it, the kind of pause where the other person is waiting to see how badly you're bleeding. Good for them, I said. Another pause. Dad, she said, Fletcher asked me to be a bridesmaid. I told him I'd think about it, but I wanted to tell you first. I held the phone and looked out the window at the mountains. That's between you and your conscience, I told her. I mean that. I'm not going to tell you what to do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she loved me, and I said I loved her too, and we hung up, and I sat in my kitchen for a long time not really thinking about anything. When you get to a certain age and a certain kind of hurt, you go quiet in ways you don't entirely control. She was in the wedding. I found out later from a cousin of Therese's who still, inexplicably, liked me, that my daughter had stood up there in a dusty rose dress and smiled for the photos. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. I did feel something shift in my chest that day that I'd be lying if I said I'd fully recovered from. I took a job that fall in Wyoming. A contractor I knew was building a lodge near Cody. Big project, 12 months minimum, and he needed someone who knew how to supervise a crew and manage subcontractors and keep a schedule. I said yes. I packed what mattered into the bed of my truck and I drove south. I'm not going to tell you it was easy. It wasn't. I ate dinner alone most nights in a diner in town that had reasonable chicken and pie that was better than reasonable. I called my sister on Sundays. I slept well, actually, which surprised me, because I'd expect the loneliness to keep me up, but I think somewhere in my body I was more rested than I'd been in years. There's a particular exhaustion that comes from living in a house where you're tolerated, and I hadn't realized how much of it I'd been carrying. The lodge project wrapped in November, 2 months ahead of schedule. The client gave me a bonus that I put straight into a money market account. I drove back to Bozeman, got Walter from my sister's house, where he'd been staying, and started figuring out the next chapter. The next chapter turned out to be a partnership. A man I'd worked with years earlier, a Finnish carpenter named Gil Bouchard, had started a small residential construction company and was struggling to scale it. He needed someone who understood both the building side and the business side. We'd always gotten along. I bought a 40% stake with the money I'd saved over the previous 2 years, and within 18 months, we had more work than we could handle. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because you need to understand that while I was doing all of this, while I was building something real and quiet, and mine, Fletcher Corbin, was coming apart. I didn't know this at first. I found out in pieces. Fletcher, it turned out, had been doing well in the years leading up to his marriage to Therese, primarily because he was managing other people's money in ways that were, depending on your interpretation of SEC regulations, not entirely above board. A client filed a complaint in the fall of my 2nd year in Wyoming, then a second client. By the time regulators got seriously involved, Fletcher had already moved money around in ways that would take forensic accountants the better part of 2 years to untangle. His license was suspended, then revoked. There were civil suits. I heard the word criminal mentioned in connection with his name, though I don't know what ultimately came of that. What I do know is that by early spring, Therese had left the house she'd moved into 2 streets over and was living with her sister in Great Falls. Fletcher's assets were frozen. The house was being sold to cover debts. This is the part where I'm supposed to tell you I felt nothing. I'll tell you the truth instead. I felt something complicated. Not pleasure exactly. More like the particular hollowness of watching something you predicted come to pass. When you work in construction long enough, you learn to recognize what's built right and what's built wrong, and you learn that the wrong ones come down eventually, no matter how good they look from the road. My daughter called me on a Wednesday evening in March. Walter was asleep on the couch beside me. I'd long since stopped enforcing the no dogs on furniture rule, and I was doing the crossword. "Dad," she said. I knew from her voice. "I know," I said. "She's in a bad spot. I'm sorry to hear it." Long pause. "She's been asking about you." I set down my pen. "What does that mean?" "It means she wants to know if you'd—" My daughter stopped. Started again. "She doesn't have a lot of options, Dad. Fletcher, it's bad. The lawyers are saying she might be named in some of it because assets were in her name too. She needs to hire her own attorney, and she doesn't have the money." I sat with that for a while. "She made her choices," I said finally. "You know I'm not a cruel man, but she made her choices." "I know. Where were these phone calls when I was eating dinner alone in Wyoming?" Silence. "I'm not asking you to take sides," I said. "I just need you to understand that I can't be the solution to a problem that she built." My daughter said she understood. She sounded like she meant it, mostly. We talked for a while longer about other things, her job, a man she'd been seeing, a trip she was planning, and by the time we hung up I was in better spirits. She was a good woman, my daughter. She'd made a choice at that wedding that I didn't agree with, but she'd made it out of love for her mother, and I understood that even if I didn't love it. A few weeks later, my daughter came to visit. She drove up on a Friday and stayed through Sunday, sleeping in the guest room and eating breakfast with me on the porch in the mornings, which was a thing we'd done since she was small. Walter approved of her, which meant a lot. Walter had good instincts. On Saturday afternoon, after we'd been to the farmer's market and come back with too much produce, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I owe you an apology." I looked up. "The wedding," she said. "I shouldn't have done it. I told myself it was complicated, that I was trying to stay neutral, that I could be there for Mom without it meaning anything about you. But it meant something. I know it meant something." I didn't say anything for a moment. I got up and poured us both more coffee, and when I sat back down I said, "Why did you?" She was quiet. "Because I thought it would be over fast. I think I believed her when she said it was going to be different. With Fletcher, that this was the real thing and I should just accept it." She looked at her mug. "I was wrong." "You weren't wrong about loving your mother," I said. "I was wrong about putting you second to make her comfortable." I reached over and put my hand over hers. She had her mother's hands. I'd always thought that, and I'd never once held it against her. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You're not going to lose me. That's the thing about parents who actually love their kids. We don't keep score." She cried a little then, which I'd expected. I didn't say anything else. I just let her, the way I'd learned to let silences sit without trying to fill them. That evening, we went out for dinner to a steakhouse I liked, one of those places with dark wood and cold beer and portions that are genuinely unreasonable, and we talked for 3 hours about nothing important. Her childhood, my father, a fishing trip I'd taken in Idaho the previous summer. Stories. The good kind, the kind you tell, not because they mean something, because they happened. When I drove her to her car in the morning, she hugged me for a long time. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said into my shoulder, "for how you handled everything." "I'm proud of you too," I said, "for saying what you said." She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were red at the rims. "I think you're actually happier now than you were." "I am," I said, and I meant it. She drove away, and I stood in the driveway for a minute, watching until I couldn't see her car anymore, and then Walter came around from the back and sat beside me like he had somewhere to be but had decided to wait. Therese did eventually call. About 2 months after my daughter's visit, early June, warm evening, I was on the porch with a glass of iced tea. I saw the number and I recognized it, and I answered, which I've thought about since. I don't know exactly why I answered. Curiosity, maybe, or just the feeling that some things should be finished properly rather than left to rot in voicemail. "Hair shell," she said. "Therese." There was a moment where neither of us said anything. I heard her breathing. "I don't know where to start," she said. "You don't have to start anywhere," I said. "I'm listening." She went quiet again. "Then I made a lot of mistakes." "I know, I didn't." She stopped. I didn't value what I had. I know that too. I'm not calling to ask for anything, she said, and the way she said it told me she'd rehearsed that line. I just thought you deserved to hear it from me. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the mountains. The sky was that deep blue you only get in June in Montana, the kind that goes on so long you stop believing it's real. I appreciate you saying it, I said, and I did. Not because it changed anything. It didn't, but because she was a person I'd shared 31 years with, and she'd managed to find some honesty at the end of it, and that mattered in the way that small true things matter. How are you? She asked. I'm good, I said. Actually good. She didn't say anything to that. We talked for maybe 10 more minutes. Nothing substantial, a cordial conversation between two people who'd once been married and were now something harder to name. When we hung up, I sat there for a while and felt, for the first time, in a long time, something close to peace. Not the peace of forgetting, the other kind. The kind you arrive at after you've looked at something clearly and decided you're going to carry it without it breaking you. The business is doing well. Gil and I added 2 more crew leads this past year, and we've got more projects scheduled than I'd have believed possible 4 years ago. I bought a small piece of land outside of town. 2 acres, a creek running along the south edge, good soil, and I've been building a workshop on weekends. Nothing fancy, just a place to make things. I've been seeing a woman named Judith. She teaches elementary school in town. She's 58. She laughs at things I actually say instead of the things she wishes I'd said. We're not in a rush about anything, which suits me fine. My daughter came back for Thanksgiving this past November and brought the man she's been seeing. He's a quiet man who knows when to listen, which I respect. He helped me clear the gutters Saturday morning without being asked, which I respected even more. Walter liked him. That sealed it. At dinner, the 4 of us around the table I built myself, the one with the thick pine top that took me 2 weekends to get level. My daughter raised her glass and said she wanted to say something. I just want to say, she started, and then had to stop and collect herself, that I'm grateful. For this. For you. She looked at me. You never made me choose. A lot of people would have. I looked at my daughter across that table, this woman who came into the world on a February Tuesday with her fists balled up and ready for whatever came next. And I thought about what it costs to hold on to bitterness and what it costs to let it go and which one leaves you with more at the end. You were always worth more than the situation, I said. I knew that. She nodded like she was saving what I said somewhere safe. After dinner, we all sat on the porch in the dark with heavy coats and cups of coffee and watched the first real snow of the season come down slow and steady over the mountains. Walter planted himself across my feet, which made it hard to move, but which I didn't mind one bit. I've thought about what I'd tell a younger version of myself if I could. The man I was at 30 or 40, the man who kept showing up and hoped that was enough. I'd tell him it's enough. Not to make other people stay, not to make them see your value, but it's enough for you, for who you become, for the life you find on the other side of the thing you were afraid would finish you. It didn't finish me. I'm 63 years old. I've got a good business, a good dog, a good woman, and a daughter who drove 400 miles to sit on my porch in the snow and be glad to be there. That's not a consolation prize. That's a life.